Good morning, good morning, good morning. How's everybody doing? There's a ticker, and we'll have the guys pop up in the corner. Wrong one. You'll get there. You'll get there. There you go. Thank you very much, Padge. I appreciate that. Did you guys have a good weekend? Are you wide awake and get ready to take this week on? We got lots for you. We got lots for you. Granny's already here. Donald's already here, and we're ready to go. Are you guys on Twitter? For those who are not, get on there. And for those who are there, go check out my tweets. Kind of broke story yesterday with Counselor Lisa Robinson out of Pickering. She's the only counselor we have found so far that has said anything like she says. And she's provided a video about a motion she's created called the Drag Time and Pride's events motion. And what it is lays out and defines very graphically what adult live performances are, very graphically. And I can't imagine anybody disagreeing with that definition. And then not making it available to minors, making that basically illegal, putting a ban on putting adult live entertainment in front of children. It's surprising how there's opposition to this. And oh my gosh, they're out there. So go and give it your support, retweet it, let us know what you think. One member on that entire council that feels this way. So she is a lone voice. So we need a lot more support in Pickering to actually advance this motion. But go check out what she's doing. It's great that this particular voice is out there now. Good morning, Monica. Nice to meet you. I see a coffee. And is Clay in there? Is Clay there? I'm asking my chat. I don't know if Clay's there. Maybe not. So good morning, Monica. Oh, I needed that. It's been a long weekend for me. Okay, so folks, go check out that Twitter. Give some support. Let's get the stuff out of reach of our children, and that'd be wonderful. So today we're back to Coutts, and we've got Granny here and Donald here, and what we got is some evidence. Well, we'll talk about it, whether it's evidence or not, but we got a whole bunch of information that we're going to be going through, and so we're going to share that with you. So good morning, Donald, and good morning, Granny.
Good morning. I am excited today. Really
excited. Are you?
But a whole bunch of things. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Oh, look who's in our chat. Maggie Braun. Maggie Braun's here. Hello. Good morning, Maggie. Nice to see you. For those that don't know who she is a activist that was put down by gunpoint and put into the snow, and then she testified at the POEC. She is an amazing person, and I got to spend 2 hours with her and Chris Deering the other day. And great to see you, Maggie. You're up early and podcast time. And then, Granny, how was your weekend?
To be honest, if you want honesty,
always honest, Granny.
Well, my best friend's husband passed away suddenly on Saturday morning, so it was a hard weekend, very hard. As many people are dealing with sadness, it was sad, but that's life.
But it brought together the family, and you guys.
Yes, yeah, and many memories. And like I said, we celebrate him. Lindsay would never want it any other way. And the man is larger than life, and the stories. So there was lots of sadness, but lots of laughter too. So as you say, it brings people together.
Yeah, and let's dedicate this episode to him and his family.
Thank you.
So we'll be thinking about them and add them to our prayers tonight.
Thank you.
No, thank you for sharing that with us. So other than that, which is a sudden loss and a tragic one, how was the rest of your weekend? Were you relaxing other than that?
Yes, but it was a drive. Like I had to drive to my friend, and then I had to drive back last night. So miles on the road again, but I do enjoy my time on the road. I think I'm calm. Yeah, I do a lot of thinking. A lot of people think the driving is hard. For me, I like it. I enjoy it. So
yeah, when my wife moved to Canada, she's from Nigeria, schooled in England, and then she moved to Canada. And I would take her on little road trips. And at first, I just take her away for a little bit. I am a Canadian, all right? Coast to coast, I can drive for 8 hours, and that's just a small leg. But for her, the longest trip she's ever been on was 8 hours. Yeah. So I took her, we drove all the way to the East Coast. Now she's used to it. So
well, my family from Scotland, when they come over here, like when you travel 3 hours in the UK, like they're in Scotland.
Yeah, you're coast to coast when you do that.
Yeah, and they think you're packing a bag. Like I drive to my mom's, it's 5 hours, and you just get in the car and away you go. They're like,
You're like, it's just on the road.
5 hours? Well, then when they came here, and there's a highway from Highway 9 down to Statler, and you can literally see forever. I think there's one little bump in the road kind of thing, and they just go, and they could see forever, and they're just going,
Yeah.
this is crazy. But yeah, because they're not used to it.
Nope, not at all. And when they see that, they're like, maybe the earth is flat. Look at that. It's not round. Yeah, maybe they say that. But yeah, that's absolutely it's a fun experience though to drive in Canada. If you can ever do the coast to coast, do it. It takes a long time. It was 2 weeks, but
I'd
it's
love
fun.
to meet your wife. I've got family in Nigeria, or from Nigeria and in
Yeah.
Nigeria. Long
Yeah,
story.
you'll meet her. Yeah, you'll
Yeah, that
definitely
would be
meet her on the
great.
25th. That's for sure.
Perfect.
Yep. Yeah, and then schooled in England, so she has the accent from England. It's cute. And when we were giving birth in for our first, the nurse says to my wife, "You have an excellent accent. It's beautiful." And I popped up and said, "That's why she's here."
Aw.
Very
It is-
good.
They got it. Yeah, we're giving birth, so yeah, it was her accent. That's why we're here.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah. But look, we had a decent weekend for the case. So late last week, we had basically a data dump. This young lady or young woman who's been tracking what's going on, collecting information. She's a novice, but she's definitely a bit of a journalist, really, the way she's been collecting information, taking notes inside of the court and that kind of stuff. So you connected her to us, and holy smokes, did she ever have some information?
Yeah.
I don't know if we'll be able to dig into it today, but we might be able to tomorrow because we're still going through it all. And this afternoon, we have a meeting with her and a criminologist as well to start going through what she's collected here. So we're very excited. Donald and I are very excited that there's just more information because this is what makes us tick. We like to get as much data as we can.
Well, that's how we're
So-
going to find the truth.
Yeah. Sometimes we'll find a needle in a haystack where, she may have written something down, didn't really know what it meant. It means this. And we look into it and boom, we have something. But yeah, so we're excited to go through this. So Donald, what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw it to you, and maybe you can chat a bit about your initial thoughts of it. Is this just a bunch of hogwash, or is this a decent collection that needs to be gone through? And kind of where you're at with that.
Well, first of all, I am so excited about two things. About what I'm seeing, but about the fact that someone, just an ordinary Canadian, took it upon themselves to start collecting data. And, there's so much out there in the news media, in chat groups, sitting in the court, a photo taken outside of the court, can't take one inside the court, or in the hallway. And, all of these pieces of information, some of them have real value. I used to say, I love the minutia of evidence, because amongst, those 30,000 pages or 10,000 photographs, there's the one thing that makes the case or blows the other side right out of the water, because they said it was a red car on a Tuesday, and here's a picture of the green truck. And there's all sorts of things. Now, the problem is, or the challenge is, what's evidence? What's useful evidence? What's not evidence? And so I'm looking at all of this, and some of it is wonderful evidence, but a lot of it could be wonderful evidence. And I'm excited because I think we now have, in the various things that Canadians care about, enough citizens out there with enough time that we can be effective gathering evidence, correlating it, making it into real evidence that could have value, could be presented as an exhibit in court and pass all the tests. And we can do that for free. We can be a team working to assist lawyers or working to assist good causes and do everything in such a way that it's useful and it will be accepted and meet the evidentiary standards in court. If only Canadians knew them. And that's part of what I'm excited about today, because I see here an opportunity and a resource for lawyers who are working pro bono, for lawyers who are working on important cases who just don't have the money or are working to defend people and they're on the public dollar because that person has no money, but they have a just cause. And if we can come together and find evidence and present it in a way that the lawyers can use, that it's searchable, that, for instance, we have a pile of evidence, but it's all organized in a database, and something happens during the trial, and the lawyer says to himself or herself, I think I saw a piece that witness said something different, and I know I heard it on, it was a TV interview somewhere, and to have that resource right there before court and during court and be able to find it and produce evidence showing that witness is mistaken at best, or worse, something else, that's an incredibly valuable resource. Now, that's what I've done all my life. I've been in gathering evidence and presenting it all my life. So if we can raise the standard of independent journalists and court assistants, let's say people who want to assist in cases, to a level that meets some basic standards, I think that the usefulness of this could be immense. Now I'll turn back to the documents that I've seen. I haven't examined them all. There's some really good stuff there that I never realized before, I never saw. I think it could be of interest to a defense counsel for the Coutts Four. I really think it could. I think there's some things there that maybe could be of interest to the press if they only cared about the case. But it has to be presented in a certain way that does a few things. First of all, we've got orders from the court that we are not supposed to discuss certain things that happen in court. We have to be careful. The other thing is we have a criminal code, and it defines identity information. So if in one of these documents we saw an address, a phone number, a social insurance number, a date of birth even, if we were to publish that or show it online in a certain way without redacting it, meaning covering it up, making the black stripe on the document, if we presented that, we could theoretically be in violation of a criminal code statute. So there are
That would be called
rules.
doxing, right?
It would be called doxing, depending on what it is, but it's also called release of identity information as an indictable offense.
Right,
So
because you can bring harm to somebody.
exactly, or intend it, or even just be reckless with it. That's the way the wording is. So if you are reckless and you present a list of dates of birth and people, things that can be of use in committing a fraud or personation, you just might be in trouble. So look, all of these standards are easy for us to adhere to, but we have to know them. And I think that there's a great opportunity here, once again, to gather a group of Canadians together to be educated in how to gather and process these facts so that they are useful to defense lawyers or the causes that we love, but also that there's power in numbers. These big law firms, they can spend $1 million on a case, and they can have 50 people literally coming in on the weekend pouring through documents. I've seen legal bills of hundreds of thousands of dollars just for that function. Well, I think the Canadians can do that in their basements. So I'm really
Absolutely.
excited. Yeah. Really excited
Yeah.
about what I've seen and about the potential that I think is there to help in causes that we want to help. That's it.
Yeah. And I think that's what we're building here, Don, is exactly that. We noticed a while ago, like on Reddit and other places, where the internet, if they come together, they can solve cases, like really solve cases. All over Reddit, there's cold cases that are being solved because internet sleuths are able to pull out and do a lot more work. One example, Donald, was during the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case. That was public, that was live streamed and all that kind of stuff. And because of that, let's get that light out there. There we go. And because of that, there was one part that the defense presented, which was a makeup thing. And this little makeup thing they were presenting was her abuse kit. So because she was getting beaten by Johnny, which by the way was proven not to be true, but this was her statement was that she was being beaten so much that she had this makeup kit, this exact makeup kit. This is the one that I always kept with me. That was in her opening statement as a defense. The internet said, hold on a second, that wasn't produced until after you said it was. That particular item was not manufactured for years after. And then the manufacturer of that makeup kit said, yeah, we confirmed that. We didn't release that until years after you said you owned it. That's the kind of thing that lawyers can't do, really. Like, it's tough for them to go in with that fine tooth of a comb and go down into the weeds that much. And that's where crowd sleuthing comes into effect. And that could be really, really valuable. Another thing I've noticed that the internet's very, very good at doing is organizing and going through large piles of information, putting it together in a sensible way, and making it navigatable so that you can find things quickly, like a wiki. This is super powerful for the legal team because, like you said, to be able to go, oh, I remember this name, but what are you going to do? Go through the papers? Because that's quite literally what they do right now. I do see us taking us a step further so that during trial, counsel can have a laptop open where people are listening to testimony and other things going on being presented, and real time could be fact checking and bringing information to the lawyer. Because I've sat in court where people have outright lied, but we can't present that evidence that day because you have to bring the evidence to the court. So usually it's like the next day or the next trial date that you can bring in contradicting evidence. I can see a time where the court will allow the evidence to come in real time. So when testimony is being done, people can be working to fact check it and then use it. So I think we are in an exciting time here, Donald. And if you were in court,
I just want to say about that vision of yours.
Yeah.
We have been doing that for 20 years, including in the Supreme Court.
I'd like to see it bigger
with over 1 million documents. But it's there. But hold it. The technology now is different than even 5 years ago. Everybody can have this for peanuts.
Yep. And I've been playing with enough AI to know that this is where there's value with AI. Because if you can train the AI on a data set of documents and information, which is how you train AIs, you literally can ask it, can you find the contradictions in John Doe's statement? And it can pull out contradictions out of their testimony. So it's going to get far more powerful. But it's a double-edged sword, though, Donald, because prosecution can start doing this kind of thing too. So real-time fact checking and real-time charges and real-time headaches for you. So it's a double-edged sword.
But don't forget, part of the duty of someone who's assisting a lawyer is not to have tunnel vision. And this is where the cops went wrong on the Coutts Four, I'll tell you that. Okay. Not to have tunnel vision, that they exclude everything. Notice the evidence that's going to be useful to the other side. Maybe it can be explained away. Maybe there's something that, another piece of evidence that shows that that's being presented in the wrong light, anything. So if you're really assisting a defense team, you're looking for prosecution evidence as well as you go along, and vice versa.
Oh, 100%.
As a copper, we'd end up arresting someone, processing them, and releasing them or not, depending on the case. And then we'd sit around with a coffee and we'd say, all right, what's his defense going to be? How do we find the specific evidence? And don't forget, you're not making stuff up. What you're doing is predicting what his defense will be. How do we find that? Okay, let's go to the neighbor across the street and see if he noticed the man stealing the wheelbarrow or whatever. And so you'd send a team out, interview the neighbors, and sometimes they'd come back and say, no, that was someone else who stole the wheelbarrow. And that's great,
Right.
because all you're looking for is the truth. Unless you are a copper with tunnel vision, and you have a political agenda, and you're setting someone up by excluding exculpatory evidence of innocence from what you present. And I can tell you, the things that I've seen so far with the limited information we have about Coutts, my article went viral on the weekend. Yes, they're gathering evidence with a political agenda in mind.
Yeah, thank you very much for putting that article up. And if you haven't read it, go check out Donald Best CA on Twitter and you will see it. Donald is an amazing writer, but what he does is he takes that information and puts it into a digestible format. And if you want to know why Donald thinks they're political prisoners, he lays it out completely. So Granny, one other thing that we got out of this little data dump was she was the source. We'll call her the source until we speak to her later, and she tells us it's okay to give her name. But the source was also in court from time to time, if not all the time, taking notes. Now, when you were there as well, I think the great benefit is, well, you're not a trained legal, so you don't know what a lot of the legalese and stuff that's going on says. And not necessarily this source either, but she recorded it. So now, after the fact, someone like me and Donald and others can go ahead and say, okay, well, this is what the court was saying. This is what that means. So the value of somebody, we'll just call her an amateur journalist, being there collecting this information allows us to continue the conversation after the fact. And she did a good job on recording what we can and can't talk about under the court order. So this gave us a lot of the framework we are able to use now. So first, I want to say thank you very much for connecting her to us. But do you believe that having people in the court, citizen journalists, recording this information and sharing it out is the new way to be doing this?
Oh, definitely. Like even amongst ourselves. So hindsight's always 2020. So when she started recording stuff and writing stuff down, and even us now in present date, and we start talking amongst ourselves, all of a sudden one of us will go, well, what about February 2nd? Wasn't there this? Or like even with ourselves, we see now February 2nd was a big date. And you see all these coincidences happening on that date. And you're going, wait a second. Even Roberta McHale's video, we can prove there was a lie. So us on the outside watching, you do see things and you do hear things and there's a coincidence or there's a common name or even us that have no experience, we're seeing things. So I do believe it's important.
Yeah, in society, we've been doing this for quite some time. Like America's Most Wanted would be an example of crowdfunding or crowdsourcing information from the audience. So for years, America's Most Wanted would give the case, give some information and say, hey, come put your tips in here. And for years, it was a successful way of finding people because it gives you a much larger base of eyeballs and ears to be looking. This is kind of the same thing, don't you think, Granny?
Oh, definitely. And the more eyes and ears on something, it's like you can have 28 people in a room and you'll get 28 different, ways of looking at it. Because what I thought I heard is not necessarily what I heard because I didn't understand it. So like you say, her writing it down, and I sat beside her through every day, and she just goes hard. She's just writing. And then if she had to go to the washroom, she hands me the papers and I'm going, write. But we document it. And like you say, we can't talk about it, but we can show you. So
yeah. And then we can go through it. And I think this is very powerful. Now, Donald, this too is a double-edged sword. So we make a request to the public and we say, hey, give us a hand. what usually happens after that is a large hand comes in. So a whole bunch of documents. Some of it's repeated, some of it is out there, some of it is bang on. So we got to go through this entire thing. So there's a bit of a process to kind of categorize, make sense of, eliminate things that aren't valid, things that have potential value, you keep. So can you explain a bit, because this is basically what you do for a living, can you explain a bit on how you go through such a large pile of documents, and what is it that will trigger you to say this isn't any good? Is there some things that you look for right away, or do you really have to absorb it all before you can eliminate it?
Sure. Well, first of all, the most innocuous piece of evidence, if you're really into it and you have the horsepower, if you have the number of people, if you have a system set up, because, you know, once you look at a piece of evidence without logging it and you just throw it away and throw it on a pile because you think that it's no good, it's not useful. You're doing two things. One, you're discarding potentially useful evidence, because just because something isn't useful now doesn't mean that 12 months from now you won't be sitting there going, darn, there was some article somewhere about, so how do you do it? Okay, how do you work with that? The second thing is, once again, it isn't evidence until you make it so.
Right.
It as an example, you can go and you can copy a newspaper article that you've seen online. Why? Why do you do that? Well, because you believe it's interesting. You believe it might have use. You believe that maybe it contradicts something the police officer said at a press conference or something like that. Whatever reason you have that you believe, you take that and you just cut and paste the text from it. You put it into a Word document, and well, what you've done is very good so far, because you've discovered something that the defense might be interested in. You've made a note of it, you've copied the words and such. Maybe you typed a few things into the Word document, or maybe you didn't. You just know that it's interesting. But when the lawyer looks at that, they go, what? What's this about? And even if it is useful, it's just a Word document. Somebody could have changed the wording in it. So how do we take what we found online and put it into something that is useful? Well, the first thing, you have to establish standards, and we'll get into that. Not right now. I mean, I could teach, and I have weeks on evidence.
Mhm.
But what you do is preserve it by taking, in effect, a photograph of it, a screenshot. And then it has to be OCR'd, optical character recognition.
Right.
Adobe Acrobat does it. And now you have a searchable document. So what you've done is you have taken a newspaper article online or a news article online, and you've made that into something where a witness, the person who found it, could stand in court and say, on July 8th, 2023, I went to the National Post website and I saw this article from a year before. I took a photograph of it, and here it is, and it says this. So now you've made it into something that can be a piece of evidence accepted, that could be challenged by the other side, but you have a witness that could say, this is the way it was.
Right.
Okay, so you've got 30,000 documents like that. How do you find that? There's a couple of ways. You make a database, you have it in a file folder on your computer desktop, I mean, in an electronic form. And if it's in a PDF format that can be searched, you can have 10,000 documents in some folder and search for that. It was a Ford truck, wasn't it? Yeah, okay. Search for Ford, and it'll come back right on your computer right now. You don't even need a database. So there's all sorts of techniques. But once again, I keep hammering it. Just because you found it somewhere and you picked it up off the ground, or you took a photograph of it, doesn't make it evidence unless you can prove the veracity of it, that it hasn't been changed, who took it, when, where, what were the circumstances, and most important, if you're helping a legal team, why do you think this is important?
Right. How's it relevant?
It's not very complicated. It really isn't. But you know, if you set a routine, you know the standards, all of a sudden the value of that work product is 1,000% more to the legal team, the defense team. And in this case, isn't that what we're trying to help the defense team?
Yeah. Well, justice, it happens to be defense in this case. But yeah.
There you go. I knew you would get in on that one. Why don't you talk about that, Jason? The difference between saying, I'm going to help the defense and I'm just going to find the truth. Give us the difference on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the narrow vision is what you have to remember here, because if you have a narrow vision on helping the defense, you're going to miss information. And it's really, I think it's unfortunate when that happens, because exculpatory evidence could be there as well. And if you're so focused on just what you think is true, you might actually miss the real truth, which could be very helpful to you. So you should always be trying to just follow the evidence and take your bias away, even if you have nothing but complete love for somebody. And I had this conversation yesterday with a dear friend of mine. You have to be able to take your morals, which is your heart and what you believe is right, and then do your ethics and separate the two. And a good defense team will do exactly that. They'll be looking for mitigating and exculpatory evidence, so stuff that helps and things that hurt you, and then examine it truthfully. If you do that, you have a far better chance of having, first, a good understanding of what really went on, and then being able to articulate that to a court, because that's really going to be your challenge, is articulating that to a court. Now, I didn't plan this, but there's a chat here that is very relevant to what we're talking about right now, and so is my book, it turns out. So Peter says, Jason's book, Bearing Witness, offers real-world advice to truth seekers in the pursuit of gathering the facts in the law. Productive way, highly recommend. I think this is relevant to this point of this talk, because we're talking about documents, which would be called real evidence or physical evidence, but there's also testimony and witness evidence from people. And that's what my book does cover, is how to record that properly so that it could be used in this context to be entered into a database, your transcript, your testimony, your witness that you actually just did. So this book does teach you how to do exactly what you were talking about there, Donald. And that's how to witness it in such a way that it can be brought into a court later as credible witness testimony. And I think that's another important piece, to be able to record it at the time, how you take the notes, how you use your phone, and what it is you're trying to record is another piece of getting some good evidence here.
Well, that's why I told you that your book is now my #1 must-read suggestion to, frankly, the hundreds of people, self-represented litigants, who approach me every year for assistance. And now I'm sending them to your book first. And I say, when you read that, call me back and we'll talk. Seriously.
No, I appreciate that a lot. And what the best thing about this book is if you get it before something happens, you'll be ready when something happens. It's good to know this after the fact, because it can help you prepare for court. But its real value is knowing this information before you even record an event with your eyes, ears, or otherwise. So I think people should pick it up and get ready to be prepared to be good witnesses. And that's really the purpose of this book. Now, Granny, I'm not trying to plug stuff. That's not who I am. But this particular part was, I think, relevant to teaching people how to be good witnesses. And this is something you sat through the court of. So I think it would even bring some value to you as well.
I'm a firm believer in education has power, and prevention. I'm a firm believer in that. And so if your book, and again, I believe we all came together for a reason, so that book would be definitely part of the reason. And if we can help educate people for the future from this, what's going on, then that's definitely got a lot of power. So your book and the timing of what we're doing is all hand in hand. It's not a coincidence, I don't believe.
I'm 100% convinced. Just like Donald went through the evidence and he came to the conclusion they're political prisoners, I've been watching the evidence for months, and I think there's divine intervention. So I'm just going to keep my heart there until otherwise I'm proven
wrong. But I think you're right. There's a reason why we're coming together now. And yeah, as we're going through this evidence from the source, there's a couple things in there that I wish they did that is covered in the book. And for people out in the crowd during these events that were taking video and stuff like that, there's some suggestions there too, because we could have had slightly better evidence. But we're doing a good job with what we've got. And for an amateur, for someone who doesn't do this professionally, she nailed it. She did a good job. Links, videos, conversations, court statements, court orders. This is good stuff.
I'm excited about this material. If I were the defense, I would be excited. As a matter of fact, if I were the prosecution, I'd be very interested in this material too. And that brings us to another point, and maybe Jason or maybe Granny wants to speak about how sometimes people who appear to be your friends and on your side or acting ethically have other agendas.
Yeah, I'll quickly speak and I'll throw it to Granny because, yeah, you're not wrong. Whether it's Coutts Four, whether it's the vaccine harm stuff we're working on, whether it's just calling out storytime hours being a bad thing, there's some weird actors out there that come out and sometimes they will buddy up with you and make it seem like they're on your side. For example, the number one thing that I've been noticing that happens to me the last 2 months since I've been covering a lot of these higher interest stories is people trying to get me to say, I want to revolt. I want to go against the government. It's time to break these men out. That one comes out a lot. People are trying to call for incitement of a type of violence. So I see this happen, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. And I'm like, well, first, do they really believe that? Do they really think that's the solution? Because they got to give their head a shake. And second, is this opposition trying to take us out of the picture by getting us to say or do things that would get us in trouble? Maybe this is what happened to the men too. So I want to, be cautious for people out there who think this way. We don't, and don't bother trying. And when you do start talking like that, you're just isolating yourself and you're highlighting yourself as not a contributor to the actual cause of justice and truth. So Granny, have you noticed that? You don't have to name anything, but are there people that sometimes come out and maybe trying to get you to say things, or you feel like this is just weird? I got to keep my eye on this.
Oh, I've had some real weirdness. Honestly, some of the things that come out of people's mouths freak me right out. Like, first off, I'm probably one of the most nonviolent people you could ever come across. I don't watch movies. Even my grandsons won't watch a cartoon with me in the room if there's a little bit of violence, because I don't believe in violence. Two wrongs do not make a right. I've had people come up and say things to me that I just go, whoa. And I just immediately, I don't even want to talk. I'm just like Jason. I'm going, are you trying to get me to say something?
Yeah.
Like, I don't even want to go, because I'm thinking the question's going to come. I'm going to go, And so I just stand there. I don't even want to talk because it weirds me out so badly. And like, I mean, even in the parking lot of Freezing Bros, I was getting some tomatoes and beets from a lady, and this guy pulled up. And I mean, he said the weirdest statement to a total stranger. And I thought, that's too weird. That's creepy. So no, I agree with you. You need to realize you're out there doing good, and some people don't want you doing good. So they want to take away, I guess, your credibility.
Right.
So I'm very cautious and weirded out.
Yeah, and it definitely came out a lot around the Coutts Four for me. As soon as I started putting out more public information about it, I started seeing a lot more of that. And it made me wonder, is that what got the guys in trouble? Did somebody come along and get them to utter something under intoxication or under passion or whatever it might have been, uttered something, and it was kind of stretched at that point beyond what it even meant at that point. And now we see what we have here, which is 512 days without freedom. So yeah, be very cautious about that. And if anybody is that way, dude, like, this isn't Canada. We have a system and we'll do it. There is no call for vigilantism. I don't think we need to go to that kind of level. Now, Donald, you're a law and order type of guy, so I think you probably feel the same way. We're not at the stage where we need to take police enforcement and the justice system into our hands in that way. We can still do it through the system that we're working on right now. You think?
Absolutely, 100%. You have to be peaceful. You have to stay within the law. And to do that, you have to know the law. But you have to be wise as a serpent. Now, look, for decades, 40 some odd years, coming up on 45, I've been undercover. I have sat with motorcycle gang members, organized crime, everything. And I've gone, that's been my assignment. And I showed before my wonderful little Panasonic recorder, just for size, went in your pocket. The ones we used to use 30, 40 years ago were the size of a big tape deck. You know, the Sony Walkman, only it weighed 3 pounds. And you strapped it to your leg and you ran the microphone, and everybody had their chest and their leg hair shaved because it just hurt so much if you didn't. You know, how to tell an undercover operator, look at his chest, look at his leg. If it's shaved, he's not on your team. But that was in the old days. Now, my goodness, isn't that a lovely Apple Watch? Isn't that you know? And that's like generations ago. And it's a great little Apple Watch. Oh, wait, what's it doing? It's recording our conversation.
Yeah.
It doesn't show the red button. It shows just the time, you know. Okay. I've got them that are video cameras. I have pens that are video cameras. And I also have great experience in civil cases where unethical law firms, usually the big Bay Street law firms, caught them many times on cases where something really matters. There's $1 billion or $100 million at stake, or some big guy's reputation is at stake, or it's the police and the politicians really need a conviction. There are teams of people, and I saw this once in a case involving something to do with the Toronto Maple Leafs. It was a civil case many, many years ago. I won't identify it more than that. But one of the law firms involved in the lawsuit hired dozens of people to go online and to make comments on news articles that would help their side, that would show the public was doing certain things. The public believed in the case and believed in it this way. So they hired an army of real human beings to create a story that assisted their case, or so they thought. We caught them. And we also caught, and the story's on my blog, and I won't go into the details right now, a major law firm in Bay Street. It's all laid out there, all the evidence. Another big civil case I was working on, the same thing. Somebody came and made threats against witnesses online from that law firm's IP number. It's all documented. So there are all sorts of nefarious people out there, and some of them wear suits and get paid $800 an hour. So, and we've seen police lie in numerous cases, and police fail to record evidence because, you know, they just get that tunnel vision, as I spoke about in my article on the weekend. They get that tunnel vision and they miss things, but they also miss evidence that shows the person they're interested in is innocent. And they exclude that evidence. And I can tell you right now, once again, read my article. I think that situation might have happened with the Coutts Four in particular, specifically when they laid out that staged table with all the evidence on it, or all the guns, the weapons they say they seized, with the RCMP car behind it, so you know which organization did this magnificent job arresting these terrorists. And I mean, that was just a stage that wasn't for evidentiary purposes. That was for propaganda purposes. How does that relate to what we're talking about now? When you gather evidence, even this wonderful batch of documents that we have here, we have to keep our minds open. That we're not just looking for defense evidence. We're looking for evidence that aids the prosecution too.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing I'd be careful about is misinformation or disinformation coming in as evidence. So one example would be the Steele dossier, which was this collection of allegations against President Trump that turned out later to be very, very untrue. But this was collected, somebody produced it, they put it together as a package, and giving Hillary's team the benefit of the doubt, which is the safest way to stay alive. What you might want to say to them is, well, they received this, but they didn't give it due diligence, and they kind of tunnel visioned it, and maybe they just ran with it. And that's
Come
giving them
on,
the benefit
Jason,
of the doubt.
they paid for it, but
my point
I'll
is similar
say that you don't have to.
Yeah, well, they offered me a temporary job. I don't know if I should apply to it. They said they want to give me a temporary job. It sounds dangerous. But in either case, my point here is sometimes if you are doing the right thing, you will receive some information which is nefarious, and it's meant to be misleading, and it could look very convincing to an untrained eye. So that's something that we would also be looking for here, because you don't know why somebody put together something and is bringing it to you. So my spidey senses will go up the more professional it looks, the more complete it looks, because it should be public tips. It should be more amateurish. I would expect it to be. So that's also something that we're going to keep an eye on as we're collecting information. Now, I did want to kind of highlight something here, Donald. You're very right about what you're saying, that defense attorneys, and even in civil litigation, so not the prosecutor, but the plaintiff. So the plaintiff's attorney could find this useful. We got reached out to over the weekend by Eva Chipawake, who's doing the vaccine lawsuit to $10.5 million for Kerry Sakamoto. She asked us to help her on this exact thing. There's a whole bunch of freedom of information requests that have been piling into her inbox, a whole bunch of tips from the public piling into her inbox, to the point where she's become overwhelmed on pursuing her current path, which is to advance this claim. So she reached out to us and she said, hey, can you help me make sense of this information, categorize it, make it searchable, and turn it into something valuable? So right there is an example of someone who's doing a great job. She's a single law firm, like the only person working on it. She's putting all her energy into it. And here's where the public can assist, both in bringing information to her and then going through that information and making it valuable to her.
I just want to say this, okay? You must also realize that there's a lot at stake in every civil and criminal litigation. There's a lot at stake. And if we're talking vaccines, there's billions and billions and billions of dollars at stake now and for years to come. And that's why we've seen some of the horrific, the tyranny that we've seen, that any doctor who would stand up and say, no, this is against my oath. I'm not going to inject an experimental gene treatment, and all of a sudden they lose their license to practice medicine. That's happening dozens and dozens of times. So we're against very powerful forces here. And one of the things that they do happened to me 2 years ago when I was testifying in a large civil suit. Once again, millions and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars at stake. I was on the stand my first day out of five days, I think. And the lawyer for the other side, big law firm, international, handed me what purported to be a web page. Somebody had gone and taken a photograph of, like a screenshot of a certain bit of evidence. And they handed that to me and they said, this. Well, what I suspected and what I later found out, and it became a weapon for the side that I was on, was somebody had modified that web page.
Right.
So in other words, did the lawyer do it? Did one of his assistants do it knowingly? Or did someone who just thought they were going to help that side come in and change the word do to don't?
Right. Change the
without
meaning.
giving more information. Okay.
Mhm.
So part of the job here is when you receive evidence from members of the public, you can't just look at that and say, oh, great, it's accurate. It's accurate. You can't assume it's accurate. You have
Right.
to go to the source if you can. You have to have knowledgeable people look at it. Because if you don't, you are inserting booby traps into the evidence on your side. And again, large law firms, some of them unethically, will hire groups of people to create now in the public square on social media fake evidence.
Mm.
This is a different time we're living in now, and I just want to bring that experience to what we're talking about here, because make no mistake, this has to be done to certain standards, or it becomes not just useless, could be dangerous.
Right. And I think what you're referring to is covered in the book too. So we have deepfakes now. So you can get audio completely manufactured and sounds completely like the person. You can now get video completely manufactured and looks exactly like the person. So that is definitely an ongoing problem too now. So the ability, like back in the day, it was just fake a newspaper. Now it's fake the audio. Now it's fake the video. And it's getting very, very good to convince people. Now, again, I'm using double-edged sword a lot today, but this is also a double-edged sword because we're using AI to detect AI now. So now there's another layer of trying to figure out whether or not these videos are real by using AI to try and detect whether or not they're real. And that also worries me because what if you get false positives or false negatives, and then that evidence goes forward? So we're in very dangerous times when it comes to that as well. So
We
thanks for
are, when it
highlighting
comes
that.
to especially online evidence, what worked last year doesn't work right now to find out, as you say, is it real or is it not?
Yeah.
And this is something we have to be very concerned about.
No, good point for sure.
But if we're talking about, we just got 20,000 pages under the Freedom of Information Act from the government, well, there it is. That's what they gave us. That's a different thing. That's a little easier in some ways.
Yeah, because they're actually, it's amazing sometimes how much information you can get in a FOI, and that sometimes also gives me a lot of faith that the government can still function right, because there are departments, and it seems to be like some people who are taking that kind of job seriously. Now, I don't want to highlight a question here that came out early in this conversation. It's from Donald Smith. He says, "Hi, it's Donald here. Hi, Donald. Uh, are case law in this country about bail? Why isn't the lawyer hitting the section 24.1 charter challenge?" All right. So what Donald's referring to here is right here. So section 24, subsection 1, remedies of the Canadian Charter. This basically says that you should be going into court and you should be having justice right away. And if not, then there's a provision under the Charter to force the court to go ahead and move. So Donald, that asked a question. What I want to highlight here is under national security and the non-withstanding clause of the Charter, the government is going to be pushing that as the exception to violating your rights. Unfortunately, we have a Charter of Rights that has a section right at the beginning that basically says the government can ignore everything that we're saying here if we want to. So we have a charter on paper that doesn't have a lot of effect. So this is what you're seeing here, Donald, the question asker. But another common law thing that we have available that should be applied here, which we are not doing, and I'm not sure if the defense is doing, it's something maybe we can find out later, is habeas corpus. This is one of the really old common law requirements that you should not be imprisoned when it's unjust. This is another argument that the defense can bring up and argue. Now, just like everything else in court, it's an application or a motion, and then it has to be argued. And I don't know if it has or not in this case, because that would be something that's not given to us. However, what I do know is it's difficult. It's difficult for these guys if there's political pressure for a judge to go ahead and do this, because a judge is going to be told in camera, it's called, which means in secret, weird name, in camera means in secret, why they shouldn't do it, and then we'll never know. I believe that conversation happened already in this case. This is why we're on 512 days. So to the question asker, I pretty confident that the defense attorneys did try that avenue, and it was shut down under national security and because the EA was invoked. So that could be why those two particular things, Section 24 sub 1 and habeas corpus, hasn't been successful so far. Now, Granny, I'm going to just ask: did these terms come up at all that you're aware of when you're in court, habeas corpus or charter challenges?
Many people and many different groups have come forward and talked to us about the habeas corpus, and I know the lawyers know about it. Again, there's certain things, like they were saying, you have to fire your lawyers, you have to, all kinds of different things, and there's 4 men inside a jail that do not understand habeas corpus. They don't even understand why they're in there. So you've got all this confusion going on. You got family members that are seniors, and it's confusion. And habeas corpus, maybe it would work, maybe it wouldn't, but the lawyers do know about it. And again, do you have to have lawyers? Can a citizen walk in and do this? But what if it goes reverse? What if you just annoy the judge? What if, and again, okay, corruption is at a high level here. And this is a big case that is not being talked about. I just don't think anything's going to be that simple in this situation.
No, and I agree, you're 100% right. Now, the CC1 that was filed a couple weeks ago could be something along these lines. We don't know because it was sealed. We don't know what's in it. But with a habeas corpus or a Section 24 sub 1, you have to kind of explain to the court why you believe these apply. That could be the CC1. The CC1 could be something completely different. So to all the people who want to be the armchair lawyers on this, believe me, they know. They know about these sections. We're taught this, and we absolutely understand this. A statute of limitations is another one. The right to due process is another one. Right to speedy trial is another one. There's a bunch. And trust me that the defense attorneys know this. And judging by the reports I've received about the lawyers so far, the current ones, they're good. They're good. So they most definitely would have been looking at this and trying to find ways to bring it forward. And that could be what this application is about.
And people need to remember, how did we get here? How did we get on 512? Well, multiple lawyers fired and quit and dumps of disclosure. That's how we got here. It just kept creeping forward, creeping forward, creeping forward. And all of a sudden it's like, how do you make this stop?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I can hear that you're getting passionate about this, because from an outsider's point of view, the legal process can be very frustrating. It moves slow. And sometimes it looks like it moves backwards. And you're like, oh, can we just go forward on this? But then all of a sudden, bang, a gavel hits, and then everything's different. Because that can happen too in the legal system. A decision can happen and boom, you're out.
Well, at least we got inside the courtroom. It wasn't trial. And it's not even called pretrial. I think it's called something else. But anyhow, got inside the courtroom. Something at least is happening.
Yeah.
Evidence is coming forward. Applications are being made. Something got found. But you had to get inside the darn courtroom. But at least they took advantage of the court time that was slated for the trial, and they used it. And something happened. So
that's exciting. And Donald, we believe it was evidence-based, so it was pretty relevant to what we're talking about here. Something was discovered in a big pile of stuff.
Well, I'd like to talk about that. You know, sometimes you don't make a move for habeas corpus or some other motions strategically on the defense, and that happened with my case too, because more evidence is coming. You can see it coming, and if you just don't forget, some of these lawyers, they're just one or two people in an office, and they've just been handed 20,000 pages of documents and 80 hours of video and 12 hours of audio that's bad. And this is not the only case, and they're doing it sometimes almost for free or free because they want to see justice. But this is the reality, and it might take a year to go through that evidence and even with good help and digest it and see where the errors are and where the tunnel vision is, see where the lies are maybe, and go out and find evidence that proves that. That takes time. That doesn't happen in a few weeks. And this is why these men should be out. We have an accused cop killer out right now. We have people who are charged with setting forest fires that destroyed, thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of acres of land, and took down businesses and homes and everything like that. And we have them out on bail. We have all sorts of gang bangers and drive-by shooters out on bail. Some have ankle bracelets. Some have various considerations. They can't do this. They've got to stay in their home. They can only go to the doctor every Wednesday or whatever it is. But these 4 remain in prison. And in that context, I am just absolutely convinced that denying them bail is a political move. It's not necessary for the safety of Canadians or anyone else. And that means that this case is political. I can see, I lay out my article on the weekend. Evidence was not processed professionally, and it was not processed for a political propaganda reason. And that was mere hours after the raid. So, this case is political. They're political prisoners, but it's going to take evidence to show that. And, you're up against the government.
Yeah, and this is kind of the tail wagging the dog, because it looks like the defense has to prove innocence on this one. And that's kind of what we're trying to do here. So that's unfortunate, but at least that's an effort we can go through as well. Well, I'm very excited about what tomorrow will bring. So I'll let everybody know that we're going to be coming back. We're having a meeting this afternoon with the source, a criminologist, and I even bringing someone else to the table, Donald, and he is an organizer of large amounts of data, similar to you, but not on the legal side yet. So he's going to be someone who can assist us if we give him procedures, and he can provide lots of hours on the processing. So I'll have that this afternoon as well. And to let viewers know, Rick Abbott, I'm in contact with him. He's going to come back to the show. So he's currently extremely busy in the mornings, but he's intrigued. He is interested. He's now looking into it. So Rick Abbott is going to come back at some point and give us an update from his side. We have Zach, the gun. I'm not going to call him a gun expert, because he doesn't call himself a gun expert. He's a gun enthusiast, so he knows a bunch of information, which was great to have him last week. He's going to come back because he spent another week looking deeper into these guns and stuff like that. And he also found some information that he didn't know beforehand. And we also have Tracy Wilson from the Canadian Coalition of Firearm Rights. I spoke to her. She's intrigued as well. What they do is they do some legal defense for people with gun-related issues. So her promise to me was, if we can collect more of the charges around the gun portion of this, not the conspiracy for anything, but the gun portion of this, they may have an interest in defending the men around that. So if there is an allegation or charges for improper transport or storage or anything along those lines, the gun portion of the charges could be taken up by the CCFR. So my commitment to her is to do our best to collect what those charges are and any information around that and provide it to her, because she's got to do her due diligence as well. So this is the progress over the last week, Granny. So we have Tracy Wilson, who can provide funds and lawyers to defend against gun-related charges. She's interested. We have a gun enthusiast who's looking harder at the guns, and we also have an ex-police officer who's now interested in what's going on here. So how do you think about that progress for this last week?
Well, it's great. Just the awareness alone is wonderful, and this other stuff is all bonus. Like it's great. And so many people are talking. Other podcasters and other shows are coming forward and want to share. I'm on Laura Lynn again this afternoon to give her an update. I'm talking with Shadow Davis, but the weekend got in between me. Like I'll send him some more information on the update. There's a gentleman down in the States that's going to do a huge article, and he wants all his I's dotted and his T's crossed because he doesn't want to cause any harm. And it's supposed to go out to hundreds of thousands of viewers. So what's happening is this trickle effect, the little crack in the dam, it's breaking through. And we can't thank everybody enough, like the family and friends and the guys. The guys are in an echo chamber. They don't totally understand what's happening yet, but they will. One day they will.
Absolutely. Well, this recorded, so they're going to probably watch these one after another. They'll binge watch all of these and then chill. So those gentlemen are going to have a good time watching all of this. All right, so we're going to wrap up because I actually have to get ready for that meeting that we have this afternoon, and I also have to get ready for an interview after that. So today is going to be a very busy day for me, so I do have to cut this short. Not short. We'll cut it here at an hour and some. But make sure you all come back tomorrow because Darnold's probably going to show us how he categorizes stuff. We're going to be able to show some of the information. We might be able to tell you who the source is. She may even join us. So go ahead and make sure you tune in tomorrow because we're going to be doing evidence. And if you want justice, you have to go through the evidence. Donald, do you want to go ahead and sign off and say goodbye to Canada?
Goodbye, Canada. It's great that you're here. This injustice, and once again, let me be clear here. I'm not saying each of these men is not guilty of each of the things they're accused of. We don't know that. We just want the truth. We want them to have their day in court. But as I said, looking at everything, I believe that the bail is being withheld for a political purpose. I've seen some of the evidence processed. Look at my article, donaldbest.ca. I believe it was processed and the usual professional standards were interfered with for a political purpose. And if we can be convinced that those two things are politically purposed, how about the laying of the charges themselves? And when this comes to court, I want to see the evidence that's presented. I think we've got an idea from how they presented those firearms mere hours after the arrests that this case is driven by politics. And once politics enters policing, it's justice that suffers. I think we're going to see that, and I hope to prove that.
Absolutely. It's the justice and the public that suffers as well. Now, Granny, we don't know if any of these charges are valid or not, but we do know that dead time has to end. So this is definitely a mission here. Let's end that dead time. Let's get them into a trial, but let's get them home for the trial. So I think that's a mission here. We're not trying to break them out, and we're not trying to prove innocence here, but we definitely want to end the dead time, and that is what we're aiming for here.
All I've ever wanted from day one is for people to see the man, and we've done that more and more every day. I hear it all the time. More and more people are seeing them. More and more people are understanding what's going on. And I've always said there's 4 men inside a building with a locked door, 4 individual stories. They just want to tell their truth, and they need the opportunity to tell their truth. And I feel we're close. The truth will come out, no matter what that truth is, but the truth will come out. That's all we want. So thank you.
No worries. And it is working. So share. I received a message from somebody who said, hey, I'm following this. And I went to a scrapyard and they know that I'm interested in the subject. The owner came running out of the office to tell them about our show. So our show is getting out there. People are aware of it. So share. Facebook is exploding on this issue. So that's wonderful. If you're on Facebook, do a like, do a heart, and do a share. Make sure people understand that every morning, 6 a.m. until they're free, you can tune in to this show. So thank you, Granny. Thank you, Donald. And we'll see you this afternoon. I'm looking forward to that meeting. You have yourself a great night, guy, or a great afternoon. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you. Now, what Jerry Armstrong Price says, Sorry, Don, I'll just mute that. We have to keep shining the light on this unprofessional conduct so it doesn't keep happening, because if they get away with this, we're all in danger. 100%, Jerry. We got to set the precedent so that injustice is not something that we tolerate. We will get behind it as a community, as a public, as a family, the Plaid family, and we will work on it. Where it seems like the ball has been dropped, we'll pick it up and continue with it. And I do like what's happening here. This is organic. This is natural. We're not forcing this. People are coming together, sources with information, people with experience, officers with opinions. It's all coming together. So whatever it is, divine or otherwise, I think it's very important that it continues to happen. And it's because of you. If there were no viewers, there were no people sharing information, you weren't sharing these videos with anybody, it wouldn't be helpful. But because of you, it is very, very helpful. So thank you all very much for being here. I love you all, and God bless.